Happy early 4th of July, everybody. I hope whether you're heading out to a lake, a beach, just staying at home and enjoying a local town parade, or cooking burgers and dogs on your grill, that you enjoy an Independence Day where you know you are free. We are less than a month away now from fall kickoff for fall camp with head coach Rich Rodriguez 2.0 of that era. A couple of weeks it'll be Big 12 Media Day, so we're going to have a lot to talk about starting in 2 weeks to a month, and then before you know it, it'll be here, y'all. It'll be the start of the 2025 regular season, so with more news to talk about at that point in time and the way fall camp develops, we still have a little bit of time, a couple of weeks, to talk about some fun things. So with it being July 4th, and a topic that I feel like I see so much sporadically during the down times of the year, where we're going to talk about something fun today. Let's talk about, in true patriotic form, one of the most patriotic things to talk about in United States history, but spin it in talking about West Virginia football, the Mount Rushmore of West Virginia University football. I was thinking maybe that, I could do this in a way, the three sports that I really follow the most out of WVU sports, football, basketball, baseball, and parlay that all into one show. But what I really would like to do is I would like to give a little bit of a narrative on each of these four members. And then I have some honorable mentions because it is really, really hard to just pick four. I gotta say, for over 30 years of WVU football history, the changing landscape of college football, in the sport itself, over that period of time, it's very hard to pick just four because I wanted to pick not just the best of the best, but transcending figures within the program who had a lasting impact. So, when you look at Mount Rushmore, you can argue for some certain other figures to potentially be on there. Swapping one or two out. So I wanted to look at in totality the ebbs and flows of West Virginia football throughout the decades. And being just 32, I know I don't have hundreds of years worth of analytical data and historical knowledge and stuff like that I can pull from best that I could from the internet and my own knowledge. I have a West Virginia University Football Vault, The History of the Mountaineers by John Antonic, right beside me here. So I try to do the best that I can to know my Mountaineer history. I encourage all Mountaineer fans to do the same, to try and know where you've been, because that will tell you kind of in context of where you are now. So picking the four, drum roll on the Mount Rushmore of West Virginia football. I went with Sam Huff, Don Nehlen, Major Harris, and Pat White. So starting it off, let's talk about Sam Huff, member number one of the Mount Rushmore of WVU football. Born in Edna Gas, West Virginia in 1934 and growing up 6 miles west of Fairmont in the tiny coal mining town of Farmington, Sam Huff lived a life described by CBS, who did a documentary on his life, as a violent world. His escape was football at West Virginia University, where in 1952 he would become a two-way star on both the offensive and defensive lines, sometimes also playing linebacker, at a time in which that many collegiate players were starting to become specialized on one side of the ball. We still see this today in high school football across the country, but once you get to the college level, it's really like you specialize at one position. But Sam Huff was so good that he could do both. So under up-and-coming head coach Art Pappy Lewis, Huff led West Virginia to a 31-7 record from 1952 to 1955 with 3 Southern Conference championships, a Sugar Bowl game appearance, and 3 end-of-season national rankings. So that was amazing for West Virginia at the time there in that early to mid-50s. an All-American, a third-round draft pick by the New York Giants, who would go on to win a Super Bowl MVP in 1961 with 4 All-Pro selections. Huff was featured on the cover of Time magazine and was later inducted into the College Football and Pro Football Halls of Fame. Huff was a catalyst of the pre-modern era of West Virginia football, taking the torch from Ira Errett Rogers, who I'll talk about later, a couple of decades earlier when he was there in the teens, the late 19 teens, and bringing West Virginia to Eastern relevancy. That was really the case to put, kind of West Virginia on the map with this national spotlight on Sam Huff. Yes, he did play alongside Bruce Bosley, who's another member, who's had his number retired alongside Huff, but he was the focal point of that team. So, from 1952 to 1979, which I will consider, and that's what I'm calling the pre-modern era of West Virginia football, back when Old Mountaineer Field was still there and before really kind of the changing of the guard with what is now Nehlen Pushkar Stadium, the flying WV logo, and then kind of the modernization of college football as we know it today. Before all that started, it was Sam Huff who put West Virginia really on the map, and that's when West Virginia could be taken with some, credibility. West Virginia really struggled prior to those 1950s years against the University of Pittsburgh. And that period of time, again, 1952 to 1979, West Virginia won 56% of its games with 7 ties, had 13 wins against Pitt, 8 wins against Virginia Tech, 3 wins and 1 tie over Penn State during that time. So, point to Sam Huff. Excellent, amazing player. Has to be on the Mount Rushmore of West Virginia football. Number 2, Don Nehlen. The winningest head coach in West Virginia football history. Coach Nehlen is arguably the most pivotal figure in the history of the program. By the year 1980, while Huff in the early 50s did, bring it, like I said, to Eastern relevancy, West Virginia really, really needed a facelift. While full of character in the heart of campus, Old Mountaineer Field had become dilapidated, and it was easier at that point in time to just build rather, and still is to this day, so in some respects, sometimes easier to tear down and rebuild. And West Virginia found a new location outside of like the heart of downtown campus with much more parking, much more, space to really grow, which it has over the last 45 years. So, Nehlen ushered what is now Nehlen Pushkar Stadium. Nehlen's brain trust created the flying WV logo, which is now iconic with both the university and the state. You see flying WVs not only, from Martinsburg to Matewan, from, Weirton all the way down to Bluefield and everywhere in between. But, you can find this logo just about anywhere. And I hope that it is never touched. It is never altered. This is what we need to have as West Virginia's logo forever and all time. And then brought over his Michigan-made toughness after serving offensive coordinator to legendary head coach Bo Schembechler up there at Michigan. And West Virginia, unfortunately, at that period of time, in the late 70s there, was marred in a 4-year rut by then head coach Frank Signetti, who previously had the worst 4-year stretch in West Virginia football history before Neil Brown broke that in 2019 to 2022. After fans chased out head coach Bobby Bowden, who then took the job down at Florida State, and as I've said, it was almost like a curse. I've called it the Bobby Bowden curse by what West Virginia fans did by chasing Bobby Bowden out of town, whether, either rightly or wrongly, or you feel indifferent to it. He goes on to be with Joe Paterno, winningest head coaches in college football history, all the success that they had down there at Florida State. Meanwhile, West Virginia's been so close to climbing the mountain, winning national championships and things like that. So, again, early 70s there, or 1976, Bobby Bowden chased out of Morgantown. Prior to that, Jim Carlin left West Virginia to go to Texas Tech after getting West Virginia to 10-1 in the 1969 Peach Bowl victory. So West Virginia needed Don Nehlen bad. Nehlen initially benefited from the stability of offensive leader Oliver Luck at quarterback and Darryl Talley defensively at linebacker, finishing the 1981 season 9-3 with a Peach Bowl win over Florida in convincing fashion. Then to kick off the 1982 season with transfer quarterback Jeff Hostetler, West Virginia had arguably its biggest non-conference regular season road victory in program history, beating the Oklahoma Sooners in Norman 41-27. I encourage you, if you are a Mountaineer fan, a diehard, please go and watch that game in YouTube to get the full appreciation of winning that game, which West Virginia never did or still hasn't done in the Big 12 for whenever West Virginia was facing those Oklahoma Sooners for all of those years as Big 12 conference competitors. So West Virginia hit its first peak under Nehlen in 1988 when sophomore Heisman candidate quarterback Major Harris led West Virginia to an 11-0 undefeated regular season record before falling to Notre Dame in the national championship game Fiesta Bowl, in which Harris separated his shoulder on the first offensive series. If you're a younger fan like myself, if you remember the national championship game in 2010 when Texas was playing Alabama and Colt McCoy had a similar kind of injury on the very first series, one and the same parallels there. So West Virginia under Nehlen got back in the national spotlight in 1993, 3 seasons into the newly established Big East Conference, and the Mountaineers went 11-0 again in the regular season with ranked wins over number 17 Louisville, number 4 Miami, in what is still the largest, most attended game in West Virginia football history, with just over 70,000 fans in attendance. I don't know how they packed them all in there like sardines, but they did. Had over 70,000 in a stadium that only sat 65. And then number 11, Boston College, the very next week after that Miami game. Awesome game. You can check all of those out on YouTube as well. Watch those for the first time myself last summer, and I was amazed at those. Very boring, that Miami game. Oh, man, it was ugly. Very defensive rock fight, but it's a game you definitely should watch, and that Boston College one was too. What a comeback by Jake the Snake Kelcher in that one. And the quarterback. The other quarter. They was running a 2-quarterback system at that point in time. I forget the quarterback off the top of my head. But unfortunately, in that 1993 season, for the older fans who remember that was the year I was born, West Virginia was passed over to play for a national championship for eventual champion Florida State, head coached by Bobby Bowden. Instead, West Virginia was relegated to the Sugar Bowl and then got thumped 41-7 by the Florida Gators. Now, Nehlen recorded 5 more winning seasons for the Mountaineers with a Music City send-off bowl game victory over Ole Miss in 2000, retiring with a 202, 128 and 8 all-time head coaching record. And in 2000, because he was previously, before being the offensive coordinator at Michigan, was the head coach at Bowling Green for a few years. And in 2005, he was inducted to the College Football Hall of Fame. So all-time winningest head coach when West Virginia needed a shot in the arm as a program, brought them, not only to Eastern relevancy like Sam Huff did, but national relevancy too, there in the late 80s and then early 90s. So let's talk about him. Number 3, Major Harris, the Brashear Bullet, as he was called in high school. Major Harris passed, actually, in high school on playing for his hometown Pitt Panthers to take the starting job at quarterback at West Virginia in 1987. So Pitt they thought that they could do better with another high school recruit, didn't recruit him as hard, whereas West Virginia was saying, hey, we want you to come. And he was also being considered by other schools to be a wide receiver coming out of high school, but instead West Virginia Don Nehlen offered him the opportunity to come in and compete right out of the gate for the starting job, and he won it. So Harris was really ahead of his time before the invention of the spread read option offense that head coach Rich Rodriguez deployed in the early 2000s. So most, especially older Mountaineer fans, wonder what Harris could have done in the modern offenses of today, because he was a true dual threat, rushing for 2,161 yards over the course of 3 seasons in a pro-style set that Don Nehlen deployed, while passing for 5,173 yards for his career. Had an absolute cannon, rocket of an arm that he was able to put on in full display at times, but still was a very run-heavy team. And it wasn't really a read option where, he had the option to run as a quarterback, but could do so if plays broke down and he needed to ad-lib it. So Harris led the 1988 Mountaineers his sophomore season to an 11-0 undefeated regular season, with rivalry wins that year over Maryland, Pitt, Virginia Tech, Boston College, Syracuse, and a legendary victory over Joe Paterno's Penn State on national television, in which he recorded what is simply known as the play, evading seven would-be Penn State tacklers en route to a 26-yard touchdown where just couldn't be brought down, just weaving in and out of every, you see juke left, 3 in a row, bam, scampers in for the end zone. So unfortunately, again, that shoulder injury on the first series of the national championship Fiesta Bowl game against Notre Dame, brought a Herculean Harris down to a level of a mortal man. And West Virginia's defense, unfortunately, just wasn't able to slow down a machine-like Irish offense that January 1989 day. So West Virginia, didn't get to play. I always say you win your toughest battles with your strongest soldiers, and unfortunately, Harris wasn't at full strength that day. Now, statistically, Harris had a better junior campaign than he did as a sophomore. Much to like I argue with Will Grier, I might take junior Will Grier over senior Will Grier. From 17 over instead of 2018. But statistically for Harris, just like Will Grier, had a better junior campaign than Grier did for a senior campaign. Finishing third in the Heisman in 1989, but a tie against Pitt at home, losses to Virginia Tech at home, Penn State on the road, and then Clemson in the Gator Bowl brought an anticlimactic end to a sensational college career, namely because West Virginia just wasn't collectively as good in 1989 as they were in 1988. And instead of sticking around for his senior season, Major decided to go pro, drafted in the 12th round of the NFL draft, but what wasn't eventually, added to an NFL roster. Really a lackluster, unfortunately, professional career that didn't include any time in the NFL, but he set the stage for big-time West Virginia quarterbacks down the road, including Mark Bulger, who would come down a few seasons later, Rasheed Marshall, obviously, under head coach Rich Rodriguez, then Pat White, Geno Smith, and Will Grier. So Major Harris, if you ask the older crowd, they're going to go with a Major Harris over this next guy that I'm going to talk about. So I have to include both on the Mount Rushmore of college football, because number 5 is always number 1 in my heart. So Pat White, who knows really what would have happened with the story of Pat White. This is, kind of adds to his legend. Had Adam Bednarik not gotten injured late in the fourth quarter, down 24-7 with just over 11 minutes to play in a home October 15th, 2005 contest against Louisville, because it was then and there that began an ascendancy for both Pat White and the West Virginia football program into national prominence, to the level that they flirted with in 2011, they flirted with in 2018, but have not gotten back to since. So not only did White, alongside his freshman teammate and running back Steve Slayton, dazzle in a 3-overtime comeback thriller, but they went on to win the remainder of their regular season games, win the Big East Conference Championship, and shock the country, beating home team and SEC champion Georgia in the 2006 Nokia Sugar Bowl in Atlanta, Georgia, the the program's first BCS bowl game victory. Ended up going the next season winning a Gator Bowl, junior season winning a Fiesta Bowl, and then 2009, his senior season, 2008, winning a Meineke Car Care Bowl over North Carolina. Arguably the greatest college quarterback to run the spread read option. White finished his college career as the NCAA's rushing yards leader at the quarterback position with 4,480, and he was the first college quarterback to win 4 bowl games, with 2 of them being BCS bowl games, as I mentioned. So a freshman All-American, Big East Player of the Year, 3-time first-team All-Big East member. White had a 35-8 career record, the sixth most career victories as a starting quarterback in college football history. At that point in time, now it's, with so many guys having 5 and 6 years worth of eligibility, it kind of skews the records there. But a 10-3 record against ranked opponents, and he set a bevy of school records. So as I said, I'd say anyone who's 40 and older in Mountaineer Nation would take Major Harris over Pat White. Anyone 40 to 20 is probably taking Pat White. But no matter who you take, personally, both were 2 of the most important players at football's most important position in the century-plus long history of Mountaineer football. And what Pat White did, I know that Michael Vick preceded Pat White, and how he was able to get to a national championship game and what he was able to do in college football. But as the spread read option grew, you saw it at Oregon also with Chip Kelly, but Rich Rodriguez also on the eastern side of the country, and how the evolution of the spread read option went, then eventually turning into the RPO that we know and everybody uses pretty much today. Pat White was one of those signature members of not only West Virginia, but for college football history. So gotta put him on the Mount Rushmore of football. So this is where it's going to get interesting. I think there could be some arguments for some of these guys and some of these folks. I've seen their names, whether you're older or younger, saying them both on social media when this topic has come up. So I'm going to throw it out there. So I have some honorable mentions that I'll talk briefly about that I think that you could include on this Mount Rushmore of football, so West Virginia football. So first honorable mention, I guess not necessarily in any particular order, but Ira Errett Rogers. So learned a lot about him doing my research for this video. From 1915 to 1919, his career was broke up in 1918 because of World War I, and there was also an influenza outbreak, so there was no West Virginia football in 1918. So he was an athletic unicorn, becoming the first Mountaineer to ever be team captain of 3 sports all in the same year: football, basketball, and baseball. That's incredible. And while he was the best player on the field against any opponent West Virginia played, according to those who watched him play in the stands or competed against him, his legend really came and went by the end of the game, because college football, with the structure and the media that we know today, just wasn't there. And then especially, this is pre-interstate, y'all, so getting to Morgantown, West Virginia from anywhere in the country was a challenging trek. And like so many other rural places across the United States, it wasn't like you can, do today if you just jump in a jet and you can be in, Lubbock, Texas, or Tempe, Arizona from West Virginia in just a few hours. So it was, travel at that point in time was difficult. So West Virginia was 24-9-4 during Rogers' time in Morgantown, with big wins for West Virginia over Princeton, Navy, Rutgers, and Washington and Jefferson, and he became an All-American in 1919, leading the nation with 147 points scored on 19 touchdowns, and he also kicked 33 extra points. So he could do it all. He was later named West Virginia's head football coach while serving as a phys ed teacher. He's a college football Hall of Famer. His number 21 is retired by West Virginia University. Definitely deserving, but it's so hard to put him in that category of 4 when you only have 4 competing against those others, and to judge because of the time period in which he played. So that's why I can't put Ira Errett Rogers on that, but if someone you asked 100 years ago, like, is he the best player in college football? Some would argue absolutely. So paralleling that, almost 100 years later, Tavon Austin. 2009 to 2012. The 2012 Paul Hornung Award winner as the nation's most versatile player. Austin was Rodgers reincarnated 100 years later on the rise of the social media age, with his highlights still being legendary 15 to 20 years later in high school, college, and some highlights in the NFL. So a two-time All-American, two-time All-Conference between the Big East and the Big 12. Austin finished his West Virginia career with 3,413 yards receiving, 1,033 yards rushing, and 2,840 yards returning with 40 total touchdowns. While his 4-touchdown performance in the 2012 Orange Bowl, in which the Mountaineers embarrassed the Clemson Tigers 70-33, large in part due to Tavon Austin's heroics, his greatest performance, and I was at this game, came in a 572-yard night against the Oklahoma Sooners in 2012, that if West Virginia just would have played some defense, if it didn't have Pat Miller on the field, and Tyler Bittencourt doesn't miss an extra point, West Virginia doesn't lose by just a single point, 50-49. But ultimately from that game, Austin was must-see TV that night. He was also must-see television anytime he suited up for the Mountaineers. I can think of, the game in 2009 that I was in attendance of. He was a true freshman, returning kickoffs. Unfortunately, a tragic day for the UConn program, the week of one of their players, Jasper Howard, being murdered from a knife stabbing. Kickoff goes back. Tavon Austin takes it all the way back to the house for a touchdown. So, kind of set the stage there, boom, putting the country all on notice of who Tavon Austin was from a true freshman, all the way to whenever he was putting the country on notice again, in lighting up the Oklahoma Sooners playing running back at that point in time. So I would say his legend is because of and I'm so thankful for him for this reason now, having been graduated 13 years from West Virginia, his legend is, for his social media highlights that are talked about the most random months, random times by the most random people across the country. It's like, all right, showing a frog or showing their, newborn baby West Virginia football, Tavon Austin highlights, because it was just must-watch TV every time he took the field. But I can't put him up there, because, trying to argue it against a major or against a Pat White. If you want to argue it, switching it out for Sam Huff, but it's just like, as I said, the impact that Sam Huff then made in that pre-modernization, taking West Virginia from kind of like a nobody program there up until the mid-50s to one that, boom, changed a lot into the 50s, 60s, and 70s before Don Nehlen got there and started the modern age. So it's a very tough argument, I feel like, if you want to argue a Sam Huff versus a Tavon Austin. So next one, and this might be kind of off the beaten path, or you might not necessarily think about, and I'll tell it to you. I'll give you some reasons why. So Oliver Luck, 1978 to 1981, and you're like, what the heck? Not a Geno Smith, or not a Tavon, or a Will Grier, or Geno Smith, Will Grier, or Mark Bulger, kind of a quarterback, or even Jeff Hostetler. You're going to go to Oliver Luck. Well, let me explain. So, 3-year starter who then set school records for career touchdown passes and completions. However, still to this day, now in the year of our Lord 2025, he's still 8th in school history with 5,765 passing yards, despite not playing in the offenses of today. So that's saying something at his ability to pass the ball in comparison to the air raid that Dana Holgorsen levied on the Big 12. So, and again, Luck got Nehlen's head coaching career off the ground on the right path. So winning the 1981 Peach Bowl over Florida, I thought was huge, setting the stage for the rest of Nehlen's career. Graduated with West Virginia, finishing 17th in the national rankings at 9-3. So, again, he's no dub. A Rhodes Scholar finalist, a 2-time academic All-American with a 4.0 GPA. He was drafted in the second round of the 1982 NFL draft and played 5 seasons with the Houston Oilers. But here's where I'll add to it. arguably just as important as Luck's playing career was Luck's impact on the football program within the athletic department as the athletic director from 2010 to 2015. So go back in time there. Luck negotiated West Virginia's transition from the imploding Big East Conference to the Big 12. Now, I know that there was a lot happening behind the scenes there, with television partners, even pulling in at one point in time Don Nehlen into the conversation with the conference commissioners and some of the other university presidents with the those of in the Big 12. It was an odd fit then. It is an odd fit still to this point in time today, that this Eastern Frontier program in West Virginia is in a Great Plains, Southwestern kind of old Southwest Conference league of Big 12. But had West Virginia not gotten that lifeboat that was negotiated by Oliver Luck, couldn't get into the ACC, couldn't get into the SEC. There weren't a lot of places to get to go. Would you have seen a significant drop-off if West Virginia was, playing in what is now the American Athletic Conference up until the point in time when Cincinnati, BYU, UCF, and Houston were added just a few years ago? How far back would we be in, facility upgrades and improvements that the football facility has now seen over the course of the last dozen years? It was the impact that Oliver Luck made as AD, adding to what he did, that I feel like you could put him up on a Mount Rushmore of West Virginia football. So kind of an out-of-the-box take. Hope you understood that breakdown. So we're talking about a lot of offense, people. Talked a lot about quarterbacks, running backs. Got to talk about some defensive players if we're going to consider them for the Mount Rushmore of college football, or for West Virginia football. So two come to mind, and it was one that was like, okay, I would say you have to put up there, but then I was like, what about the other guy? And I think the two that come to me is Darryl Talley versus Grant Wiley. And the reason why on Darryl Talley is Grant Wiley broke a lot of his records, especially in terms of tackles. I think just 8 more for Wiley versus Darryl Talley. The plays that Darryl Talley had in a loss 16-13 against Pitt in 1982. I might have that year wrong there. Didn't have that necessarily wrote down in my notes, but in the same game had an interception and had a punt block return for a touchdown for West Virginia, only scoring 13 points on the day. So Darryl Talley just absolutely did it all, force to be reckoned with. But then I look at Grant Wiley and I look at his statistics and West Virginia wasn't very good in 2000 and 2001, but think about his goal line stop at Virginia Tech in 2002 where he stopped Lee Suggs on the goal line against a nationally ranked Virginia Tech, was there again when West Virginia beat when West Virginia beat a nationally ranked Virginia Tech in 2003. Grant Wiley, I would love to have his shoulders in those pads. My goodness, that dude was just a force of nature, wrecking ball. So it's hard to pick one versus the other. So I think you have to put one in the same of Darryl Talley and Grant Wiley. So next, moving on, I think could be an honorable mention, and it's really because of the pairing. I feel like you could put, if you could almost Siamese twins these guys, I feel as if they go together like peanut butter and jelly. Steve Slayton to Pat White. He was the right hand to Pat White and everything of his come up and West Virginia's come up. You couldn't really talk about one without the other in the conversation. And because Pat White stuck around for an extra year, graduating as a senior while Steve Slayton went on to the NFL draft and was drafted in the 3rd round, that it's okay, when comparing the two, or just thinking about the two, Pat White comes first, Steve Slayton comes second. So I don't want to forget about him. I had 3 Steve Slayton jerseys growing up. Absolutely loved this man. So thankful that he's getting his induction into the West Virginia Hall of Fame this upcoming fall. So Slayton, of course, burst onto the scene as a true freshman in West Virginia's only loss of its Sugar Bowl winning 2005 campaign. That was Game 5 at home to nationally ranked Virginia Tech, who was led by Marcus Vick. He had 100 total yards against the Hokies and really never looked back after that game. taking the starting position away from Jason Colson, Pernell Williams, and then West Virginia's first ever 5-star of the online recruiting rankings age in running back Jason Gwaltney, who chose the Mountaineers over defending national champions USC. I still don't understand that one to this day, but Gwaltney ended up, not panning out, dropped out of school, and taking that mantle. And I'm thankful that they had this guy in Steve Slayton, just took it from there. Finished his 9-game 2005 campaign with 1,128 yards rushing, with 95 yards receiving and 19 total touchdowns. And who could forget his record performance in that Sugar Bowl against Georgia, putting the SEC on notice. And arguably, he was better as a sophomore than he was as a freshman. 2006 consensus All-American honors, right up there alongside Darren McFadden. I felt like they were the two best running backs in college football that year in 2006, both definitely deserving of being one of those Heisman finalists, although Slayton wasn't invited to New York. Had a WVU record at that time, 1,744 yards rushing. That was 4th in the country at that point in time. So he, and combining with Pat White that year, had 2,963 yards with 34 rushing touchdowns themselves. So, oh my gosh, total yardage, 4,978 total yards and 49 total touchdowns on the season together. He was absolutely sensational. It was just a damn shame that he got injured in that Gator Bowl and came up lame the following season in the Fiesta Bowl at Oklahoma. In 2007, I feel like I talked about this just a few months ago when the news broke that West Virginia was going to be honoring Steve Slayton this upcoming season. I felt as if in 2007, after having a sensational 2006 year, the scouts, people were in his ear trying to say, hey, you got to put on a little bit more weight. You're only like 5'9", 5'10". If you're going to try and play in the NFL, you're going to have to play upwards of like 220. And that's what he kind of ballooned to. Just think he lost just a bit of a step. And then West Virginia was able to complement him with Noel Devine, true freshman. So you didn't necessarily need, in air quotes, the heroics of a super Steve Slayton like you did in 2005 to 2006, because you had Noel Devine waiting in the wings. But it's not to say Slayton didn't do fantastic in 2007 as well. Had over 1,000 yards rushing. Finishes his career short of breaking Avon Coburn's all-time rushing record. But when you look at the numbers between the two of them, Avon Coburn had over 1,000 carries. Slayton had just over, like 600 some for a career. 664 yards, had a full yard more per carry than Avon Coburn did for his career. Obviously has the nod in total touchdowns for a career. So I don't want to disparage one versus the other. I don't. As a Mountaineer fan, I'm thankful for both players. But considering the rise that West Virginia had with Slayton next to White during that point in time, I think that transcended or meant more than what Coburn was able to do. I think he was a horse. I think that, and to be able to handle the kind of workload that he did there in the early 2000s is phenomenal. I definitely think he deserves the notoriety that he did, but if I'm trying to take one versus the other, I'm taking Steve Slayton as my all-time running back in West Virginia football history. I know some other, Mountaineer fans also love Amos Zaraway, so I get that. Noel Devine was also excellent in the years after Slayton left the program and went to the NFL. So West Virginia has been a really good program for a very long time at halfback. But I think I put him at number 1. The last person who I will controversially end this video with, because how can I not end a video and make some sort of controversial statements or try and be a lightning rod, stir the pot, something like that? I wouldn't necessarily consider him an honorable mention right now on the Mount Rushmore of college football. but has the potential to eventually get here on the top four. Let me say it. Rich Rodriguez. Yeah, already had his first era from 2001 to 2007, which he won 60 games. 14 players drafted into the NFL, had that BCS. I'm not going to give him the Fiesta Bowl because that was Bill Stewart's coach team at that point in time. Definitely giving him the Sugar Bowl, giving him the Georgia, against Georgia Tech, sorry, I'm blanking, the Gator Bowl. When you compare Rich Rodriguez to Don Nehlen, Nehlen's at 149 wins. So that's 89, he would have to more than double what he already won in 6 years prior, and we know how good those 6 years were. Nehlen had 11 ranked wins. National Coach of the Year in 1988. Obviously got West Virginia to the national championship game in 1988, the Big East championships. Rodriguez won Big East championships. 15 first-time All-Americans. West Virginia had a lot of All-Americans under Rich Rodriguez. 56 players drafted into the NFL. That was over 20 years, y'all. That was over 20 years. What did Rodriguez do in 6? Had 14. And Nehlen also had a 4-9 bowl record. So that was one of the things kind of holding down Don Nehlen. When you think about the totality of his career, not to knock him, but wasn't as good in bowl games as well. So Rodriguez, where I'll put it here, guy's 62. People, and the way that man works, eats, sleeps, breathes, has made his family basically like a football coaching and like powerhouse machine. I mean, his daughter's in the football program, his son's in the football program. Like they eat, sleep, breathe coaching and being part of football. So if under Rodriguez, West Virginia can see this some sort of renaissance, the same way that when Nehlen took over for Cignetti, that Rodriguez is taking over for Neil Brown, who really, as I've said before, dropped West Virginia a peg in national prominence and relevancy, never to the likings of, say, an Alabama and Ohio State, those kinds of programs, but as like the second clear tier, kind of there that somewhat was declining, somewhat kind of stabilized at points in times under Dana Holgerson. You can think in 2012 West Virginia was top 10 in the country. 2014 they had it was always those odd years. 12, 14, 16, 18 West Virginia was like still flirting with the national top 25. That's why I'm saying I thought they were clearly at that point in time still kind of floating in like the second tier of college football. Second or third tier, however you really want to peg it there. But that dropped, unfortunately, with everything that happened with conference realignment, that's happened with the transfer portal and NIL, and what's happened, unfortunately, under former head coach Neil Brown's tutelage at the helm of the program. It needs a shot in the arm desperately, and it can start so this upcoming season. So if Rodriguez can try and I don't know what this means in concept from when he said it at his introductory press conference and like later, but make things right. Again, don't know what that means. Is that conference championships? Is it getting to the college football playoff? Is it winning a national title? Which he said that West Virginia, you can win a national championship here. Wow. If that can be done in this second era and he can coach again, 10 more years? I mean, maybe. Who knows? Wow. Again, looking at his contract, what he's being paid in the context of what the best coaches in college football are being paid right now of close to or upwards of over $10 million, and he's not even at $4 million. To get the kind of fan support, booster support that Neil Brown never had in terms of NIL dollars, and continually to be able to support this now $20.5 million, salary cap under the guise of revenue share. I think he's got a really give a lot of credit to one of his players. And I don't think you could ever put a kicker or punter on your Mount Rushmore of college football, but everything that Pat McAfee is now bringing to the program in terms of a sports media figure, an icon with his personality, where would West Virginia be right now if it wasn't for Pat McAfee? I'm serious. I'm 100% serious here right now. Is we as West Virginia, fans of this program, would be, as irrelevant as some of these G5 programs. I feel like if it wasn't for Pat McAfee continuing to try and push, the West Virginia name, narrative, bring as much publicity and exposure to this program that has, again, had to fight so far uphill to try and stay nationally relevant when Neil Brown was just shooting it, at the, chopping us down at the knees by losing to programs that West Virginia should not have been losing to during 2019 to today. So if Rodriguez can what he's trying to do, stabilize this roster while also completely trying to change the culture and mentality, and that you play for the team on the front of the jersey and not on the back. And I don't care who you are. I'm going to try and, replace you if you're not going out there and playing hard all the time, all game, every game. Changing the culture, if that's going to lead to, future winning and putting players into the NFL, which will then jumpstart recruiting, not now, but down the road, maybe as soon as the, fall 2027 class, then we're talking here. And if he can eventually get this program to a competitive enough level that when all of college football is going to realign for the realignment to end all realignment with new divisions in the SEC and the Big Ten, either to get West Virginia included in that SEC, which the Big Ten, as I've argued and said just recently on my friend Kuz's Corners programs, that West Virginia is not going to ever get included into the Big Ten because of its holier than thou academic standards and stuff like that. So at West Virginia's best chances getting into the SEC. If it's not that in the next 5 to 6 years, whenever those the breakaway happens with the new TV revenue, divisions and revenue model and all that's coming, or a Big 12 kind of comes out of nowhere, challenges these two conference giants in the SEC and the Big Ten, is that a third player who could still build a coalition of teams that has more geographic based rivalries and can kind of bring up that second tier of programs and stabilize in a division, a smaller than what we have now, but not so small that it's just two conferences with, say, anywhere, of 40 to maybe 50 teams within it. Instead, it's a little bit bigger than that, and it includes a program like West Virginia. The Big 12 kind of gets shifted around, and West Virginia can survive still. And, again, if it's not in the SEC, that's going to be the, number one conference out there. But it's West Virginia's in the number 3 conference, and we're, again, playing teams like Louisville and Pitt and maybe Maryland or Syracuse, Virginia Tech, and we can start to play our Eastern traditional regional rivals again and get to that competitive level. And that's the next wave, in 2030 and beyond of West Virginia football. I'm happy with that as well. I'm really happy with that as well. So I hope you liked this. This was a lot. This was even a little bit longer than I thought this would go because we had a lot to unpack. So almost 50 minutes in. Love to know your thoughts. Good, bad, or indifferent. Leave your comments here on YouTube. If you've liked it, please like it so more Mountaineer fans can see it across YouTube and hopefully bring you some entertainment here over your July 4th weekend as you're cooking some hot dogs or hamburgers or something like that and need your West Virginia football fix. Again, love to talk basketball and love to talk baseball on this same subject, but just for this program and the time that I would commit to it, I don't want this to go over an hour and stuff like that, but would love to talk about basketball version of WVU's Mount Rushmore and baseball and stuff like that. So please share this so more Mountaineer fans can see it, and love to have you a subscriber to my channel as we gear up for this 2025 regular football season. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. Hail West Virginia, let's go and spot the ball.